My beloved child, wait, pause right here, because something is aligning in ways you don't usually notice. You didn't click this by chance. You didn't arrive here because the internet wandered. There is a reason this message found you at this exact hour, with your mind quieting and your defenses lowering. What if the very fact that you're seeing this is the signal you've been asking for, just not in the language you expected? Think about how many paths your day could have taken. Think about how many tiny decisions had to line up for you to be here now. The world looks random on the surface, but the deeper you look, the more patterns begin to reveal themselves. Progress, breakthroughs, and turning points never announce themselves loudly at first. They whisper. They wait until the mind is still enough to hear them. Here is the strange truth most people never consider. The future doesn't arrive all at once. It sends advance notices, small nudges, uncomfortable curiosities. Moments like this, where something pulls your attention and you can't fully explain why. Tonight isn't about believing in something mystical. It's about recognizing awareness when it knocks. Some people spend their entire lives reacting. Others learn to observe. The observers notice that every major shift begins with a question that refuses to go away. A thought that returns when the room is quiet. A feeling that says, there is more for you than this current version of your life. You may think you're watching a video, but what if you're actually being invited into a different way of seeing? One where limitations are not walls, but temporary settings. One where your current position does not define your trajectory. The most powerful changes don't start with action. They start with perception. Stay with this a little longer. Not because something dramatic is about to happen on screen, but because something subtle may already be happening inside you. The people who change the world aren't always the loudest. They're the ones who notice signals early, and act before others even realize something has shifted. And here's the quiet question to hold as you listen. What if tonight is the moment you stop dismissing that inner nudge as coincidence? Hold on. Before your mind jumps ahead, let's slow this down. Because clarity arrives when speed disappears. Most people think success is about force. It isn't. It's about alignment. About seeing reality for what it actually is, not what you were taught to assume it would always be. Look at how innovation truly happens. Not through comfort, but through curiosity. Not through certainty, but through relentless questioning. The future belongs to those who are willing to feel slightly uncomfortable today. That discomfort you've been feeling lately, it's not confusion. It's expansion. You might have noticed it already. Restlessness. A sense that routine no longer satisfies. A quiet impatience with explanations that once seemed enough. These are not problems. They are indicators. Signals that your internal operating system is ready for an update. Here's something rarely said out loud. The mind resists change right before a breakthrough. It creates doubt. It creates excuses. It tells you to scroll away, to save this for later, to return to the familiar. But the familiar is where growth slows. If this message resonates even slightly, take it as confirmation that you're tuned in. And if you feel like someone else needs to hear this perspective too, quietly share it with them, or leave a thought in the comments. Not as noise, but as a signal to others who might be standing at the same threshold. And if this kind of clarity matters to you, staying connected here may serve you well in moments ahead. Now consider this. The future isn't built by people who wait for permission. It's built by those who recognize patterns early and move with intention. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to stop ignoring the data life keeps showing you. Tonight isn't asking you to change everything. It's asking you to notice one thing differently, to question one assumption you've been carrying. Because when one assumption falls, an entire reality can reorganize itself around a better idea. And there's something else, something most people miss entirely, that becomes clear only when the noise finally drops away. Stay right here. This is the part where everything quietly connects. Because once awareness turns on, it doesn't turn back off. You begin to see how timing works, how certain messages arrive exactly when the mind is ready to receive them, how opportunity often disguises itself as curiosity before it becomes momentum. The truth is, your future self has been leaving you clues. In the books you felt drawn to, in the conversations that lingered longer than expected, in the ideas that felt too big at first, but refused to leave. These weren't distractions. They were coordinates. You don't need motivation tonight. You need recognition. Recognition that you are not behind. You are not late. You are early. Early in seeing that the old rules no longer apply the way they once did. The world is shifting faster than ever, and those who adapt mentally before they act externally gain an unfair advantage. Before you sleep, let this settle. Nothing meaningful happens by accident at scale. Not breakthroughs. Not awakenings. Not moments of clarity that arrive when the day finally goes quiet. If you're seeing this now, it's because you're closer to a turning point than you realize. Don't rush to define it. Don't force an outcome. Just notice what stays with you after this ends. The thought that repeats. The question that sharpens. The idea that feels oddly calm instead of overwhelming. Because the next step doesn't reveal itself to those who demand it. It reveals itself to those who are ready to see. And once you see it, there's no unseeing what comes next. Wait, before you settle back, something just shifted. The question from before is still hanging in the air, isn't it? That quiet feeling that this moment wasn't random. That sense that timing itself leaned in closer. You felt it. And if you did, this section may explain why. Most people think awareness arrives loudly. It doesn't. It arrives as recognition. A calm realization that something you once ignored now feels important. The mind begins connecting dots it used to overlook. Patterns emerge where there once seemed to be noise. This is how turning points actually begin. Here's a surprising insight. The future doesn't reward intelligence alone. It rewards those who notice signals early. Signals show up as curiosity, as a pull toward ideas that feel slightly ahead of your current life. If you've been sensing that pull, you're not imagining it. You're responding to information before it becomes obvious to everyone else. In the next few seconds, something will connect. Not because of what's being said, but because of what's being remembered. Think back to moments when you felt ahead of the curve. Times when you saw potential before others did. That ability never left you. It just got quieter under routine. There's a reason certain ideas keep returning to you late at night. When the world slows down, the future speaks more clearly. During the day, noise competes for attention. At night, truth rises. That's why this message meets you here, when defenses drop and honesty slips through. Here's the hopeful part. You don't need permission to think bigger. You don't need validation to question outdated limits. The most powerful shift is internal, realizing that your current circumstances are not predictions. They are snapshots. And snapshots can change quickly when direction changes. You may have been taught that progress is linear. It's not. It moves in leaps. Long periods of quiet learning, followed by sudden clarity. That clarity often feels like calm certainty, not excitement. A knowing that says, this makes sense now. If this message resonates, you know where to find the next one. Not as an obligation, just as alignment. The right information tends to find those who are ready for it. Now let's go deeper. There's a futuristic truth most people miss entirely. Technology changes fast, but mindset determines who benefits. The people who thrive aren't the ones chasing every trend. They're the ones who understand first principles, how things work beneath the surface. And here's the revelation: you've already been training for this moment without realizing it. Every challenge sharpened your awareness. Every delay forced you to think differently. Every time things didn't go as planned, you were being prepared to see options others would miss. This moment may explain what you've been sensing lately, that quiet impatience, that urge to reposition yourself before something shifts globally. History shows it clearly: those who sense change early don't wait for certainty. They wait for clarity. And clarity often arrives right before sleep, when the mind stops pretending. Stay with this thought. What if the discomfort you felt wasn't doubt, but readiness? What if the reason this message found you now is because your internal timing finally matched the external moment? There's one more layer to this. One truth that ties everything together but hasn't been spoken yet. It changes how you see coincidence, timing, and your own role in what comes next. But there's one truth still missing. You were meant to hear this section most of all. Not because it's louder than the rest, but because it arrives at the exact moment your mind is ready to connect what's been forming quietly beneath the surface. The missing truth from before is still hovering, and now it's ready to take shape. Think back to the question left unresolved. Why you? Why now? Why this message, at this hour, when the world is finally quiet enough to listen? Here's the first reveal. Timing is not random, it's responsive. It responds to awareness. When awareness reaches a certain threshold, information appears. Most people live as if life happens to them. Visionaries live as if life responds to them. That difference changes everything. Not overnight, but decisively. The shift begins when you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start noticing, "What is trying to reach me?" In the next few moments, everything will connect. Because the truth isn't hidden, it's layered. And each layer only reveals itself when the previous one is understood. Here's something rarely discussed. The future doesn't belong to those who move fastest. It belongs to those who move deliberately before momentum becomes obvious. Long before the world agrees, there's a quiet phase where only a few can sense the direction of change. That phase feels lonely, uncertain, almost invisible. If you felt slightly out of sync with the world lately, that's not a flaw. That's positioning. The people who build what's next often feel disconnected from what is now. Not because they're lost, but because they're ahead of the curve emotionally before they're ahead of it practically. Here's the hopeful turn. Awareness doesn't demand immediate action. It demands alignment. Small internal adjustments that quietly compound. A change in what you pay attention to. A refusal to dismiss ideas that feel too early. A willingness to sit with questions instead of rushing toward shallow answers. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, the feeling that your old goals no longer fully satisfy you. That achievements without meaning feel empty. That success, redefined, must include impact, freedom, and clarity. These realizations don't come to everyone. They come to those prepared to carry them. Another reveal: clarity often arrives disguised as calm. Not excitement. Not urgency. Just a steady knowing that says, this path matters. When that calm appears, it's wise to respect it. Because it usually precedes decisive change. You're not being asked to leap blindly. You're being invited to see clearly. To recognize that the rules you were given were written for a different era. An era that's quietly ending. Those who adapt internally first will navigate externally with far less friction. Stay with this a little longer. There's one more insight unfolding. The reason this message feels personal is because it is contextual. It meets you where you are, not where you were, and not where you think you should be. Here's the mystery that remains. Awareness opens doors, but choice determines which one you walk through. And the next part isn't about information. It's about a realization that changes how you see your own role in what's coming. Before the next part, something must be revealed. Pause. Before your thoughts drift, notice what just surfaced. The question from the last moment is still alive, still unresolved. If awareness opens doors, which one is truly yours? That tension you feel isn't pressure. It's proximity. You're closer than you think. Here's the first reveal of this part. Choice doesn't arrive as a thunderclap. It arrives as alignment. A quiet convergence between what you know and what you're ready to become. When that convergence happens, the mind stops chasing and starts selecting. That's when momentum becomes precise. You'll understand everything at the end, but only if you let this idea land now. The world is accelerating, yes, but acceleration favors those who simplify. Visionaries don't add complexity, they remove noise. They decide what matters, then let everything else fall away without guilt. Think about how often you've been busy but not fulfilled, active but not aligned. That's not failure, it's feedback. Life was teaching you to distinguish motion from direction. Direction is what changes outcomes. Motion just creates fatigue. Here's a surprising turn. The most powerful leverage you have isn't effort, it's focus. When focus locks onto a clear principle, time bends. Progress compounds. Small decisions begin producing disproportionate results. This is why the future seems to reward a few while ignoring the many. It's responding to clarity, not hustle. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Notice how calm replaces urgency when truth settles in. Calm isn't complacency. It's confidence without noise. The kind that allows you to wait, observe, and then move decisively when the signal is clear. Another reveal, intuition isn't mystical guesswork. It's pattern recognition operating faster than language. When you feel a steady pull toward a direction that makes sense at a deeper level, that's not imagination. That's experience integrating quietly. Respect it. This moment may explain what you've been sensing lately, the urge to prune your life. Fewer distractions. Fewer borrowed goals. A cleaner path. Pruning isn't loss, it's preparation. Trees bear more fruit after the unnecessary branches fall away. If this message resonates, you know where to find the next one. Not as a request, just as continuity. Signals tend to repeat until they're understood. Now the hopeful wave rises. You are not required to know the entire route, only the next true step. Clarity works like a lighthouse. It doesn't illuminate the whole ocean, only what's needed to navigate safely forward. Take that step, and the next light appears. Here's the revelation that changes perspective. You don't chase the future. You position for it. Positioning is internal first. Beliefs, standards, attention, then external through choices that match those internals. When the two align, opportunity recognizes you. Stay present. There's one more layer forming. It's about responsibility, not as burden, but as privilege. To choose consciously is to author your trajectory instead of inheriting one. But there's one truth still missing. Stay with me. Before the night fully settles, something important is coming into focus. The missing truth from before is closer now, almost within reach. You've felt the build up. That quiet pressure that isn't stress, but readiness. This is where tension turns into understanding. Recall what's been circling since the last part. Responsibility as a privilege. Choice as authorship. Here's the next reveal. Most people underestimate how powerful a single, conscious decision can be when it's made from clarity instead of impulse. History doesn't pivot on crowds. It pivots on moments when someone decides differently than expected. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Not as a dramatic revelation, but as a simple reframe that changes how you interpret your own past. Consider this. What if every delay you resented was actually buying you time to see more clearly? What if confusion wasn't blocking you, but slowing you just enough to notice the right direction? Here's a surprising insight. The future doesn't punish hesitation, it punishes unconscious repetition. Doing the same thing with the same assumptions leads to predictable outcomes. But the instant awareness enters the loop, repetition breaks. New paths appear where none seemed possible. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, that urge to stop reacting and start designing. Designing how you spend attention. Designing which problems deserve your energy. Designing what kind of impact actually feels meaningful to you. Design is intention made visible. Now the hopeful wave rises again. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You need to refine yourself. Strip away what was added to please, impress, or survive, and what remains is surprisingly precise. That precision is your advantage. It's rare, and rarity creates value. Another micro reveal. The most influential thinkers don't chase certainty. They build systems that adapt. Instead of asking, "Will this work forever?" they ask, "Will this teach me faster?" Learning velocity matters more than flawless planning. Those who learn quickly correct course early, and early corrections save years. Let this settle. Calm doesn't mean stagnation. Calm is the absence of internal resistance. When resistance drops, energy becomes available. Ideas flow. Decisions feel lighter. Action stops feeling forced. That's alignment in practice. You may notice something else now. The world feels slightly wider. Possibilities feel less abstract. This isn't imagination, it's perspective expanding. Perspective is what turns information into wisdom. And wisdom changes how you move through time itself. Stay present a little longer. There's a deeper layer still unfolding. It's about identity, not labels, but self, permission. Permission to outgrow old versions without apology. Permission to choose depth over noise. Permission to trust that clarity you've been building quietly. Here's the mystery returning. Awareness shows you the door. Alignment places your hand on the handle. But there's one final element that determines whether the door opens at all. Before the next part, something must be revealed. Hold on. Before this moment passes, notice the stillness that just arrived. That lingering question from before is ready to be answered now. The final element. The one that decides whether the door actually opens or quietly closes again. You remember where we left it. Awareness showed you the door. Alignment placed your hand on the handle. So what determines the outcome? Here's the reveal. Commitment to identity, not outcome. Most people commit to results they can already imagine. Visionaries commit to the version of themselves capable of navigating unknown results. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Because identity is the lever most people never touch. When identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. No force, no burnout, just coherence between who you see yourself as and how you move. Here's the surprising insight. The future doesn't ask what you want. It responds to who you're becoming. When your internal standards rise, external opportunities recalibrate automatically. This is why some people seem to attract momentum while others chase it endlessly. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, that quiet discomfort with playing small. Not because you crave attention, but because something inside you knows your capacity has been underutilized. Capacity doesn't announce itself loudly. It waits patiently until permission arrives. Now the hopeful wave deepens. You don't need to abandon your life to step into this. You integrate it. Small, consistent choices that reflect a higher standard. Saying no faster. Choosing depth over speed. Investing attention where growth compounds instead of drains. Another micro reveal. Discipline isn't about control. It's about alignment repeated. When actions match identity, discipline feels effortless. When they don't, even simple tasks feel heavy. Lightness is feedback. Pay attention to it. There's a futuristic truth here. As the world becomes noisier, clarity becomes a competitive advantage. Those who can think clearly, decide calmly, and move deliberately will shape what comes next. Not through dominance, but through coherence. Systems respond to coherence. Stay with this. Calm certainty is forming now. Not excitement. Not urgency. A steady sense that says, I know what matters. That knowing is rare. And it's fragile if rushed. Let it stabilize. You may notice your attention changing already. Less scattered. More selective. This is not withdrawal from the world. It's engagement at a higher resolution. You begin seeing leverage instead of chaos. Patterns instead of problems. Here's the revelation that ties it together. The door doesn't open because you knock harder. It opens when you're ready to walk through without needing reassurance. When you trust your clarity enough to act quietly, consistently, and without applause. Sit with that tonight. Before sleep. Let it settle into the background of your thoughts. Tomorrow doesn't need a dramatic plan, just a slightly higher standard applied naturally. But there's still one layer beyond this. One final perspective that reframes everything you think this message has been about. Before the next part, something must be revealed. Listen, before the night fully claims your attention, something subtle is unfolding right now. The layer hinted at before is surfacing, and it reframes everything you thought this message was about. The mystery hasn't been about destiny alone. It's been about perspective. Recall the quiet certainty from the last part. That calm knowing that doesn't rush. Here's the next reveal. Clarity isn't a destination you reach. It's a lens you choose to look through. When the lens changes, the same world suddenly offers different options. In the next few moments, everything will connect. Because the final perspective is simple, yet rarely seen. Most people wait for confidence to act. Visionaries act to build confidence. The order matters. One creates movement, the other creates delay. This moment may explain what you've been sensing lately, the feeling that waiting for the perfect time no longer makes sense. Perfect timing is a myth. Responsive timing is real. Responsive timing listens, adjusts, and moves when alignment is present, even if certainty isn't complete. Here's a surprising insight. The future isn't something you enter. It's something you practice. Every day you rehearse it through choices, habits, and attention. You are already practicing a version of tomorrow, whether consciously or not. Awareness simply lets you choose which version deserves rehearsal. Now the hopeful wave arrives gently. You are not behind. You are in rehearsal. Every insight you've had, every boundary you've learned to set, every moment you chose clarity over comfort, it all counts. Nothing was wasted. It was preparation without a label. Another reveal. Progress often feels anticlimactic in the moment. No fireworks. No announcement. Just a subtle shift in what you tolerate and what you prioritize. Those shifts quietly compound until one day the distance between who you were and who you are becomes undeniable. Stay with this thought. The reason this message feels calm instead of urgent is because urgency belongs to those who feel late. Calm belongs to those who sense timing. Timing doesn't shout. It signals. You might notice something else now. The need to explain yourself less. The desire to prove less. When identity stabilizes, explanation becomes unnecessary. Action becomes the language. Consistent, quiet, undeniable. Here's the revelation that reframes the entire journey. This was never about a single moment or message. It was about training your perception to notice when something meaningful is happening without needing permission to trust it. That skill outlasts any advice. It compounds over a lifetime. Let this settle as you prepare for rest. Sleep isn't an ending, it's integration. The mind organizes what it values most before tomorrow begins. What you give attention to now becomes easier to access later. There's one final mystery still forming. It's not about what you should do next, but about how this awareness changes the way you experience everything that follows. But there's one truth still missing. Wait, before you drift any further, notice how quiet everything feels right now. That silence isn't emptiness. It's space. And space is where the last truth finally has room to appear. The mystery from before is still alive, still unresolved, but now it's ready to be seen clearly. Recall what lingered at the end of the last part. Not what you should do next, but how awareness itself changes everything that follows. Here's the reveal. Once awareness stabilizes, life stops feeling like a series of reactions and starts feeling like a dialogue. You notice feedback sooner. You adjust faster. You move with less friction. In the next few moments, everything will connect. Because the final shift isn't external at all. It's perceptual. You stop asking, "Is this a sign?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me right now?" That single question changes how every experience is processed. Here's a surprising insight. Most people miss opportunities not because they aren't capable, but because they're waiting for certainty instead of coherence. Coherence is when thoughts, values, and actions point in the same direction, even if the destination isn't fully visible yet. Coherence creates traction. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, that subtle increase in confidence without a clear reason. That calm willingness to let some things fall away. That comfort with not explaining every choice. These aren't random emotional shifts. They're indicators that your internal compass is recalibrating. Now the hopeful wave settles in deeper. You don't need to hold on to every idea, every plan, every version of yourself. Growth often looks like subtraction before it looks like expansion. When excess falls away, signal strength increases. You hear yourself more clearly. Another micro reveal. The people who shape the future rarely feel certain when they begin. They feel aligned. Alignment feels lighter than certainty. It doesn't promise outcomes, it promises integrity. And integrity creates resilience when plans change. Stay with this. There's a reason this message unfolded slowly instead of delivering a single dramatic conclusion. Real understanding doesn't arrive in a flash. It arrives as recognition layered over time, until one day you realize you're responding differently than you used to. You may notice tomorrow that small things no longer trigger you the same way. That distractions lose some of their pull. That decisions feel quieter, but firmer. This isn't detachment. It's discernment. Discernment is what allows progress without burnout. Here's the revelation that reframes the entire experience. This message didn't arrive to tell you who to become. It arrived to remind you that you are already becoming, whether consciously or not. Awareness simply gives you authorship over that process. Let this integrate as you rest. Sleep doesn't erase insight, it organizes it. What matters most settles deeper. What doesn't quietly loosens its grip. By morning, you won't feel transformed, you'll feel oriented. And orientation changes outcomes more reliably than motivation ever could. There's still one layer beyond this. One final realization that brings everything full circle, not as an ending, but as a beginning you'll recognize when it arrives. But there's one truth still missing. Stay right here. Before this settles into memory, something final is beginning to surface. The unanswered truth from before isn't missing anymore. It's been waiting for the right frame to reveal itself. And now, that frame is in place. Recall what has followed you through each part. Not instructions, not predictions, but a shift in how you perceive timing, choice, and yourself. Here's the next reveal. The real message was never about what happens to you. It's about what happens through you once awareness is active. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Because the final truth is quiet, almost understated. When awareness stabilizes, life stops testing you and starts collaborating with you. Not magically, practically. Opportunities begin to feel conversational instead of confrontational. Here's a surprising insight. Most people live inside stories they didn't consciously choose. Stories about limitation, about pace, about what's realistic. Awareness doesn't destroy these stories, it exposes them. And once exposed, they lose authority. You don't fight them. You simply outgrow them. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, that lightness around decisions that once felt heavy, that reduced need for external confirmation, that comfort with letting outcomes unfold without micromanaging every step. These aren't signs of indifference. They're signs of trust, in process, in learning, in your own adaptability. Now the hopeful wave deepens again. You don't need to become someone else to move forward. You need to stop interrupting your own momentum with doubt borrowed from the past. Momentum grows when you allow consistency to do the work instead of constantly reassessing your worth. Another micro reveal. Clarity isn't fragile. It strengthens with use. Each time you act from alignment, even in small ways, it becomes easier to recognize next time. This is how intuition sharpens. Not through belief, but through feedback. Stay with this feeling. There's a reason the message unfolded at night. Night isn't about endings. It's about integration. About letting the noise settle so signal can rise. What you accept quietly before sleep often guides what you prioritize without effort tomorrow. Here's the revelation that reframes everything once more. This wasn't a message to convince you of anything. It was a mirror, showing you what becomes possible when attention, identity, and timing finally align. The mirror doesn't tell you who to be, it reflects who you already are becoming. You may wake up tomorrow feeling unchanged. That's expected. The deepest shifts don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves later, through calmer reactions, clearer decisions, and a growing sense that you're no longer waiting for permission. Let this rest with you. Let it integrate naturally. Because the most important realizations don't push you forward. They pull you into coherence. And yet, there's still one final layer. One last perspective that turns everything you've heard into something you'll recognize in real time. Before the next part, something must be revealed. Wait, before you let this drift into the background, notice how your attention sharpens right now. Something just aligned. The question from the last part wasn't asking for an answer, it was preparing you to recognize it when it appears in real time. Recall what's been quietly building. Not a command. Not a destination. A way of noticing. Here's the next reveal. The final perspective isn't about the future at all. It's about the present becoming more responsive the moment you stop treating it as an obstacle. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Because responsiveness changes the texture of time. Days feel less rushed. Decisions feel less heavy. You begin sensing inflection points, small moments where a choice carries more leverage than usual. Here's a surprising insight. Breakthroughs rarely look like breakthroughs when they arrive. They look ordinary. A conversation that lands differently. An idea that sticks instead of passing through. A decision you make calmly that later reshapes months. The difference isn't drama. It's recognition. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, that subtle increase in patience paired with sharper resolve. Patience without passivity. Resolve without aggression. That combination is rare, and it's powerful. It allows you to wait without wasting time. Now the hopeful wave returns, steadier than before. You don't need to chase meaning. Meaning emerges when your actions reflect your values consistently. Consistency compounds quietly. Others notice later. You feel it first. Another micro reveal. The mind wants certainty, but progress wants commitment. Commitment to learning. Commitment to iteration. Commitment to standards you don't negotiate with yourself anymore. When standards rise, self-trust follows naturally. Stay with this feeling. It's not excitement, it's orientation. Orientation tells you where to place your next step without showing you the entire path. And that's enough. Paths reveal themselves to those who move with integrity, not those who demand guarantees. You may notice how this changes the way you listen to the world. Noise becomes easier to ignore. Signals become easier to spot. You start distinguishing urgency from importance. That discernment saves energy, and energy, when focused, becomes momentum. Here's the revelation that tightens the frame. This message didn't arrive to motivate you. Motivation fades. It arrived to calibrate you. Calibration lasts. Once calibrated, you don't need reminders. You need rhythm. Small actions repeated in alignment with who you're becoming. Let this settle as the night deepens. What you accept calmly now becomes a reference point later. When uncertainty appears, you'll remember this orientation, not as words, but as a feeling of steadiness you can return to. And here's the mystery renewing itself. The most important signal isn't ahead of you, it's around you. It will appear as a choice that feels simple, even obvious, when the time comes. You won't need to force it. You'll recognize it. But there's one truth still missing. Wait, before you relax into certainty, feel that subtle tension returning. Not anxiety, anticipation. The kind that appears when something essential is about to be understood, but not yet named. The signal from the last part is still active, and now it's asking to be interpreted. Recall what lingered before, the idea that the most important signal isn't ahead of you, but around you. Here's the next reveal. Signals don't announce themselves as opportunities. They arrive as choices that feel small in the moment but carry unusual weight. The weight isn't pressure, it's significance. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Because significance has a distinct texture. It feels simple, but not trivial. Obvious, but not easy. When you encounter it, the mind quiets instead of racing. That quiet is how you know you're aligned. Here's a surprising insight. Most people miss pivotal moments because they expect transformation to feel dramatic. It rarely does. Real transformation feels understated. It blends into normal life so seamlessly that only later do you realize everything changed because of one calm decision you didn't overthink. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, that increasing sensitivity to timing. You notice when conversations matter more, when silence matters more, when saying nothing is wiser than filling space. Sensitivity like this isn't fragility, it's precision. Now the hopeful wave rises again. Precision allows you to conserve energy. You stop scattering attention across things that don't return value. You invest it where growth compounds quietly. Over time, this creates an unfair advantage, not because you work harder, but because you waste less. Another micro reveal. Momentum doesn't always feel fast. Sometimes it feels inevitable. When direction is correct, progress feels less like effort and more like continuation. You're not pushing the river. You're aligning with its flow. Stay with this. There's a reason the message keeps circling instead of concluding. Conclusions close loops. This is opening one. Awareness doesn't end, it deepens. Each layer makes the next easier to recognize. You may notice your internal dialogue changing now. Fewer questions about what if, and more curiosity about what next. That shift matters. What if looks backward for reassurance. What next looks forward for coherence. Here's the revelation that reframes your role. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are noticing when to choose. Choice doesn't require certainty, only clarity about what aligns and what doesn't. When alignment is clear, hesitation becomes unnecessary. Let this integrate gently. No urgency, no demand to act immediately. The most durable changes begin quietly, then persist without maintenance. When action is required, it will feel natural, not forced, not rushed. And yet, the pattern isn't complete. One final perspective remains unspoken. It doesn't change what you do. It changes how you recognize when the moment has arrived. But there's one truth still missing. Pause. Before this settles too neatly, feel the subtle shift happening now. Something is rearranging itself, quietly. The question from before is still present, but it's no longer asking what you should notice. It's asking how you recognize the moment when noticing becomes knowing. Recall where we left it. One final perspective remained. Not to change your actions, but to change your recognition. Here's the reveal. The moment arrives when resistance disappears. Not when excitement peaks. Not when fear vanishes. When resistance softens, and the next step feels neutral, almost obvious. In the next few seconds, everything will connect. Because the last layer isn't dramatic. It's elegant. The future doesn't interrupt you. It integrates with you. It slides into place when your internal state matches the demands of what's next. Here's a surprising insight. Readiness doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like simplicity. Fewer arguments in your mind. Fewer justifications needed. When readiness is present, decisions require less explanation, even to yourself. This moment may explain what you've been sensing. That strange calm around changes that once would have unsettled you. That ability to let plans evolve without gripping them tightly. That comfort with saying, "I'll know when it's time," and actually trusting that statement. Now the hopeful wave expands. You don't need to monitor progress constantly. Growth doesn't respond to surveillance. It responds to consistency. When alignment is in place, progress continues even when you're not watching closely. Another micro reveal. The most effective people don't wait for motivation. They wait for resonance. Resonance is when an idea doesn't excite you, it steadies you. It feels like something you could do for a long time without burning out. That's how sustainable futures are built. Stay here. Let the rhythm slow. There's a reason the message keeps circling instead of concluding. Circles refine understanding. Each pass removes excess until only signal remains. You may notice now that the need for external validation has faded slightly. Not disappeared, but loosened. When direction is clear, validation becomes optional. Helpful sometimes. Unnecessary always. Here's the revelation that completes the pattern. The sign you've been waiting for isn't a message, a person, or an event. It's the absence of internal noise when a choice appears. When the mind stops negotiating, the signal is clear. Let that settle. This doesn't demand immediate action. Recognition often precedes movement by days, weeks, sometimes longer. That delay isn't stagnation. It's calibration finishing its work. As you rest tonight, notice what feels lighter. What feels unnecessary to carry forward. What ideas remain without effort. Those are clues. Not instructions, clues. And yet, even now, the circle hasn't fully closed. One final integration remains. Not a new idea, but a real, world moment you'll recognize when it happens. Before the next part, something must be revealed. Wait, before this completes itself, feel how everything has slowed into clarity. Not silence. Presence. The kind that tells you this isn't ending, it's arriving. The final integration hinted at before is here now, and it doesn't announce itself loudly. It recognizes you quietly. Recall the last clue, a real, world moment you'll recognize when it happens. Here's the reveal. The moment won't feel extraordinary to others. It will feel ordinary to the world. But to you, it will feel unmistakably right. That's how you know it's real. In the next few moments, everything will connect. Because the truth isn't theoretical anymore. It's practical. The signal appears as a choice that fits so naturally you almost overlook it. A conversation you decide to have. A direction you stop resisting. A step that feels neutral, not heroic. Here's a surprising insight. The universe doesn't reward intensity. It rewards coherence. When who you are, what you value, and how you act finally line up, progress accelerates without effort. That acceleration feels calm, not chaotic. This moment may explain what you've been sensing, the sense that something is about to happen, without anxiety attached. That feeling isn't prediction. It's readiness meeting opportunity. When both exist together, the next step reveals itself without force. Now the hopeful wave completes its arc. You are not searching anymore. You're recognizing. Recognition requires less energy than searching. It feels lighter, more precise, less desperate. When recognition arrives, doubt doesn't disappear, but it loses authority. Another micro reveal. The most important decisions rarely come with pressure. Pressure belongs to fear. Clarity belongs to alignment. When alignment is present, you move because it makes sense, not because you're trying to escape something. Stay present with this. You may notice gratitude emerging quietly, not for outcomes, but for perspective. Perspective is what allows you to see how every part of the journey prepared you for this exact orientation. Nothing wasted, nothing random. Here's the revelation that closes the circle. This message was never meant to direct you. It was meant to tune you. Once tuned, you don't need constant guidance. You recognize guidance as it appears in real time, embedded in normal life. You'll notice it tomorrow, or the next day, or when you least expect it. A moment where resistance is absent, where action feels clean, where the mind stops negotiating. That's the signal. That's the answer to the question that started all of this. Let this rest with you tonight, not as motivation, as calibration. Calibration doesn't fade. It becomes your new baseline. And when that real, world moment arrives, and you'll know it when it does, you won't wonder if it's an accident. You'll simply move. And that's how everything changes.